Hi everyone, my name is Ming. I'm one of the Microsoft student partners in New Zealand, and I'm here to help you through your journey through MSA. In web development, or any kind of development really, you will need some kind of development environment. In this section, I'll show you how you can set up your web development environment using industry standard tools so you can start building your website effectively. This will help you with both your Module 2 submission and your summer placement. So here are the core components of any dev kit, especially for web. First, you'll need something to write and edit your code, and for that you'll have a text editor. While you're writing your code, you're most likely going to use third-party libraries and development kits, which is why you'll need to use some sort of third-party package manager to integrate it into your own project. Finally, you'll need to test your website locally before you deploy it onto the web. So for that, you'll have some sort of browser and a local web server. So let's go through some of these core components. Text editor looks like this basically. You have a view of your code, which is usually colored according to the language you're using. And in a lot of text editors, there are built-in programming tools which will help you. Things like autocomplete, and some will even underline errors for you while you're developing, so you don't have to find out while you're testing. And you've probably come across a few text editors for programming before. There's Notepad++, which some of you may have used at uni. Sublime Text, a popular one, but it costs money, I think. There's Atom, which is made by GitHub, which is very open source and hackable, and Visual Studio Code, which is what we'll be using. We're using it because it's cross-platform, it's open source, and has a lot of neat tools like autocomplete and syntax highlighting and error underlining. So then it comes to the package manager, which again is to help you manage your third-party libraries and tools. You can find and install almost all of the popular packages out there, and you can use the package manager to manage them as well, so doing things like uninstalling and upgrading. So here are a few of the popular ones for web. There's Node Package Manager, which is part of the Node.js JavaScript runtime environment. This is probably the most essential one because it's used to install all of the other package managers out there like Bower. So this is the one we'll be using. Bower, the one next to it, is very good for front-end dev. So actually it's probably the preferred package manager for what we will be using. But again, we will be using NPM to get you familiar with one of the package managers first before we move into another one. And then there's NuGet, which is part of Visual Studio Community Edition. You might come across this later in the year when we're starting to work with server-side applications and building your own APIs, because it works really well with ASP.NET. But for now, I'm just showing you in advance. So then, once you've sort of coded up your website to some extent and you're ready to test it, you need some way of testing it, and fortunately you can just use a browser. Now, a lot of the popular browsers have a lot of dev tools and debugging tools built in. So if you look on the right in that screenshot, you can view the source code of the web page that you are testing, and there's a console where you can run JavaScript commands, and you can do a whole bunch of things like simulate different screen sizes and locations. So like I mentioned, a web browser is one of the essentials, and you can use essentially any of the popular web browsers out there. We'll be using Google Chrome. That's because Google Chrome is cross-platform and it has a lot of the neat dev tools, and is a very established browser. And of course you can test your web pages just by double-clicking the HTML file and opening it up in the browser. But for more complicated applications like the one we'll be building, you won't be able to use some of the features because web browsers block a lot of JavaScript features by default for security reasons. So for that, you will be using a web server. And there are a whole bunch of web servers out there, some more full-blown than others. For us, for our purposes, we'll be using BrowserSync because it's lightweight and it's very popular. Has a few neat tools like live reloading, so if you change something in your source code, it will reload the browser straight away. So just to summarize, these will be the tools we will be using. We will be using Visual Studio Code as our text editor, npm as our package manager, and we'll be testing our stuff through BrowserSync and Chrome. So now in this tutorial, I'll show you how you can get set up with these tools, and we'll run a few basic examples to make sure that everything is working properly. And all of the steps and resources will be available on our GitHub repository, which can be accessed through this link. So let's get started with the tutorial. Cool, so let's get started. Start by heading over to our GitHub repository, aka.ms/module2, and this is where we have all our documentation. It's going to be constantly changing, so it might look different by the time you see this video. Just head over to section 2, development environment, and this is where I have documented all of the steps for setting up your environment. And just head over to the tutorial here. Step by step, it will show you what to download and what commands to run. So let's just go through this. First of all, download and install Visual Studio Code. I'm just going to, I think it's control click. Yep, control click just opens a new tab. This will look different depending on whether you're on a Windows or Mac, but I'm on a Windows machine right now, and clicking on that will download the latest Visual Studio Code setup. Once you have that downloaded, just open it and just head over, accept the license agreement. Default location is good. Just make sure that you have open with code action for both the file context menu and directory context menu ticked. This will be very useful, and you might as well add it to the path as well, which means that you can just run code in the command line and it will open code in your current directory. And just hit next, and just proceed from there. I'm not going to actually install it because I already have it installed, so I'll just exit this for now. You should install it though. Cool, so the next section will be installing Node.js. So click on the download link, control click. You'll be taken to the Node.js download page. So just download the LTS version, the recommended for most users, and download the appropriate installer, Mac or Windows. Because I'm using a Windows, I'm going to just download the Windows installer. And cool, that should be downloaded soon. Let's see. It's taking a little while. While that's doing its thing, on Mac, basically you just run the package and oh hey, there we go. On Mac you just run the package and the install is very similar. So now the setup wizard is opened. I'm just going to hit next. Again, accept the license agreement, default installation directory. Now this is the important part. Make sure that this is enabled. Adding it to path. I think if you're on a Mac, it's a little checkbox, so just check that you have added it to the path, because this will be required if you want to run any commands in the command line, which is what we'll be using. Now once you're done, just press install. Again, I have it installed already, so I'm not going to install it. Now with this one, for some machines you will need to restart your computer, most likely if you are on a older Windows machine like Windows 7. If you're on Windows 10, you should be good. So I'm not going to restart my computer because I already have it installed, but the next step basically is to test it out. So I'm going to head over to command line, just going to press start and type in cmd. Here's my command line, and to test whether everything is working, just hit npm. If you type in npm and everything has been correctly installed, you should see messages that look something like this. So this is if you have a successful setup. Now, if it says command not found, try restarting your computer, and if it still doesn't work, then you'll need to add it to your path manually. And if you have that problem, just let us know and I'll put up a tutorial on how to do that. But anyway, my npm is working correctly, so that's good. Let's go to the next step. npm again is a package manager, so it allows us to install other packages really easily. So the first one we will be installing is browser sync. So basically type in that command npm install g browser sync, and if everything goes well, you should get a little installation progress bar, and it'll just go on and install it. Now if you're Mac, you might get a permission error, and if you do need to type in sudo in front of it, which is documented in our documentation here, and you'll need to type in your password. Now this is generally in practice it's not ideal, and I'll explain why later on, but for now, if you want to get it working, just do that. Cool. And if everything is installed properly, again, to test it out, I'm just going to type in browser-sync in my command line. If it's been installed properly, you should get a little help file, I guess a help output that shows you how you can use browser sync. And that's all good there. Cool, so again, now installing TypeScript. If that worked alright, then it should be exactly the same. Now I'm lazy, so I'm just going to copy paste this in my command line this time. npm install -g. So -g means to install it globally, which means you can run the command in any folder. By default, if you don't put that in, it will just install it to your current directory, and it will only work in your current directory. Cool. So TypeScript's installed now. Again, to test out TypeScript, I'm going to just type in tsc. Should come up with a help file and not some error saying that I can't find a command. Great, and then just going to scroll down. Now, let's get on to the second tutorial, which is creating a project and running some of these commands to test it. Great, so the second part of the tutorial, first thing we'll do is open up Visual Studio Code. So just type in Visual Studio Code, there we go, and yeah, you should open to a blank page. Now just expand the little Explorer tab on the side, this is very useful, and we're just going to open a new folder. I'm just going to create a new folder. Let's call this demo website. Cool, just open that folder, or you can just go select folder, that worked too, and let's open that folder. Now in Visual Studio Code, unlike Visual Studio Community, if you've used that before, it doesn't really use a project file. All you do is have all your files in a folder and just open the whole folder. And that's your project essentially. It keeps it simple. So let's head on to the next part of the tutorial. That's to create a new file. So we're going to create our index.html file. If you remember from the previous section, it is the core file of the landing file of your website. So I'm just going to go new file, index.html. It's really useful that you can create files directly through Visual Studio Code. You don't have to go and create one in Explorer. Yeah, so here's our index.html file, and I'm just going to copy paste a snippet across. So I'll just take this snippet on GitHub and paste it in here. Very simple HTML page, title saying setup successful, heading, congratulations, you've successfully set up your development environment. So let's see if we can get this. So of course, one way to test this out would be to just double click on the file. What we will do is use browser sync. which we just installed. So if you go onto the files, oops, sorry, forgot to say save the file, yes, which I did. So now what you want to do is test this web page using browser sync. Now to open the terminal, you can just go View, Integrated Terminal, or just press Ctrl-tilde. So this opens up the terminal or command prompt in your current directory, which is the directory we just created, demo website. Now we will start a web server to test our HTML file, and we will use browser sync, so type in browser sync start, which tells it to start browser sync. Now we need to add the option server to start the server in the current directory if you don't specify a path, and we will add the option files. Now this tells it to watch the files, and if they change, reload the browser automatically. Makes testing a lot easier. So we'll specify where to watch the files. I'm just going to do double quotes star or asterisk, and this tells it to watch all the files in the current directory. So if I hit enter, let's see what happens. So it'll take a little while to load at first. Cool, there we go. Now you can see that it's loaded up a web page. It said connected to browser sync on the right hand side, and this is the HTML page that we just created. So let's try out the live reload. So if I just drag this to the side, put this on the side, okay. Notice how it says watching files. I'm going to make a change in here. I'm going to call this hello world instead, and I'm going to hit save. You can see that it's detected that the file's been changed, and it's reloaded the browser automatically. Great, that worked just fine. Now let me show you how you can do the same sort of testing if we included a style sheet in this project. So I'll head over to the Explorer and I'll go create a new file. I'll make this style.css. Now I'm going to first of all link this style in my index.html, and let me just add another line here. Let me just add it here instead. Cool. And I'm just going to use a Visual Studio Code shortcut. I'm just going to type in link and press tab, and you can see that it's created the tag for me automatically. So let's see, it's in style.css. Great. So we've linked up our style sheet now. I'll just hit Ctrl S. You can see that it's detected that my file has changed, my index.html has changed. Now I'll go back in the style sheet and I will change the color of heading H1. So I'll just declare H1, and then let's change the color to blue. Now it's watching the CSS file as well because we told browser sync to watch everything. So if I hit save, you can see that instantly the heading changes to blue. And this will work the same with JavaScript files as well. As soon as you change the JavaScript file, it will reload the browser. So that's all for this section on setting up your dev environment. By now, you should have a fully working development environment which you can start using to develop your website. Try some of the concepts in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that you learnt in the previous section, but instead of using CodePen, try using Visual Studio Code instead. And you will be using Visual Studio Code for the rest of the modules, so it's best to get familiar with it. Yeah, so that's all from me, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the module. Thank you, bye.